Good morning, welcome to today's RC Coffee Chat. Good mornings. And a very warm welcome to you. Well, I hope it's warmer than what it is here at the moment. It is a bit wet in Bristolia at the moment. Right, what have we got on the topics list for you this morning? You are going to be meeting Eat My Marrow. This is Eat My Marrow, or Codename EMMA. We'll be meeting her in a few moments' time. And brilliant, loud and clear, Andy. Thank you for that. As well, really appreciate that. I did just check the audio. We have done a few silent starts before. We will be talking about foam snow as well. We'll also be talking about, as you can see on my screen, which is that way. Sorry, this is really confusing because it's the wrong way round. On my screen, we will be talking about the topic of ventilation in RC models because that one has been and made its own ventilation. Which is a little micro Skywalker. Need to get that right. We're also going to be talking about how to work out the CG of a flying wing. So we're going to be taking a look at two different flying wing calculators this morning. One is slightly different than the other. One is... You're going to find out about those in a few moments' time. We're also going to have a chat about the iNav progress as well of that playlist and that series on iNav 2 because we are very, very near the end and it's getting very, very close to Maiden Day as well, which is classed as Happy Days. So I tell you what, let's get straight into this as we normally do. And good morning, everybody who is on. You can see the live chat going on above my head and I've got the live chat over here on my left-hand side as well. Right, so let's talk about Eat My Marrow. Now, what am I talking about? Is that I'm sure many of you know that I like to name my models humorous names or names which make me chuckle. And this one, to give you some background, I used to play a lot of Counter-Strike Source. And one of the guys, Ray, called Evil Sausages, there's always this one phrase he just came out with. It was just like, eat my marrow. And that's always stuck in my head, which sounds really wrong, doesn't it? Anyway, it's always tickled me. And I was going to call this one M. And then I thought I'd better put an A on the end. So this is actually her real name is Emma, which stands for Eat My Marrow AHole. And that keeps me amused. Now, why have I been migrated to the dark side? In short, I've wanted something which I can chuck around in the trees. We've had too many windy days here in Bristolia, and chucking like the S-back out the front or the little rainbow wing, they're just getting chucked around too much. And I wanted something which I could perhaps take around the trees instead in the wooded area. And a quad would have been perfect for that. Now, I did watch a collection of different series on YouTube, and that has. I'm going to give you like a pre-warning. I'm alarmed by some of the things which some YouTube channels get away with, and that has alarmed me. And there will be a episode out in the next week or two covering this topic head on because I feel that you and I are being lied to, and that I'm trying to keep this as tactful as possible, and it's a topic which needs to be tackled head on, and I'll be doing that in the next 2 weeks or so. So you'll find out about that in a later episode. But in the meantime, I want to say a massive thank you to Paulo for suggesting the little frame. Now, this little frame is a Genesis 215K little frame. Now, I know it's not the most popular little quad frame out there, but for me, now I've been and got it here, it is the perfect size on here. We've got little 5-inch props on little tri-blades. Now, I did put 50-51 props on it, and these motors are 2600 kV, and Vicious is the best summary of 50-51 props with 2600 kV motors. It was absolutely bonkers. It would literally go from here to about 100 foot on half throttle in about a second. And it was a little bit skits to fly. And thankfully, yesterday I had some 50-40 props turn up, and I've put those on there, and it's calmed it right down. It's much, much more manageable. And apologies, I don't have any footage of a maiden, etc. But we will get some footage out of her going in and around in the trees. I did do her FPV maiden in the woods, and Eat My Marrow did really well. Absolutely brilliant. Didn't hit a single tree. Did clip a branch, and the props still look perfect, so that's good. That's good going. So a maiden was pretty damn good, to be honest. So that's the setup which I've gone for. A little 215 kV, sorry, little 215 frame. Works out really well. I've got a little video transmitter on the top. The little 3D printed part, actually, there's very few parts for this on Thingiverse, but I want to do a big shout out to Mr. 2FPV Ninjas, because he made this little part on the top and here, so that we can then secure the video transmitter here on the back. And that's worked out really, really well. I'm quite impressed with that part. What else have I got in there? It came with a PDB, the power distribution board. I thought that was a really, really nice touch. I haven't hung it out the side. Instead, I've gone for put it out the back. Now, the reason why I went out the back is because I'm using one of the Omnibus F4 V2 boards with the current sensor on. And I've had to interrupt the power supply, like the mains voltage, to be able, as many of you know, that we want to hijack the little resistor so we can see the current draw on it, and that's what I've been and done on the back. So we've got the XT60, which is on cable, so it's got some flex in it, so we're not going to snap off the back of the board, which is a big thing for me. We've got the D4R2 receiver in there. In fact, that's the last thing which I've got to do on this little quad, is that I need to sort out the antennas, because at the moment they're just, don't know if you can see them, where are they? They're just hanging out here on the sides, which is less than ideal because that's carbon frames. But I'm not going massive distances. We're only talking about 100 meters away tops. So that's all we're doing with it. So we're not going to lose signal there. But I do need to make some form of antenna mount where I stick them out the back or bring them out the top. I've not really decided what I'm going to do with that yet. I have put the Runcam Mini Swift on the nose, which has worked out really, really well. Obviously, that didn't fit the provided little carbon plates, so I've actually screwed or bolted down the actual camera mount on the bottom. And I have given in and actually decided to make the battery on the bottom as well. Now, build time, I was actually really surprised on that. Build time was literally about 2 hours. That's all it was, because all we're talking is just a couple of like bolts, you know, screwing some bolts, and then we had some soldering to do on the top of the board. And so build time was approximately 2 hours all in. It was really, really quick, but we do now need to allow an extra hour for all the swearing which went on for trying to solder in all the little ESC wires in the right place, and also Matt swearing it BH Heli configurator, because the order in BH Heli is not the same order which you find in Betaflight. The only challenge which I had during the build wasn't anything to do really with the build itself. It was to do with the ESC choice in Betaflight, which I think I went for D-Shot 600, I think, in the end, or 300, I can't remember. And I've been out and flown it. As far as rates, now, I know that the quad pilots out there are going to freak out on this one. She does exhibit a bit of prop wash, but it's not masses, and frankly, I'm going to leave all the PIDs alone. The rates on it itself are perfectly fine, quite manageable, and she doesn't really exhibit any bad behaviours, so I'm going to leave them as they are. And I know if we were perhaps more of a quadcopter channel, we would go into PID tuning, and we would spend hours upon hours dicking around with rates, and we're not going to do any of that here. It flies straight. It doesn't have any nasty tendencies. I'm super impressed. It's fulfilled everything which I wanted. All the parts which I actually bought for this, it came to about 80 quid. Obviously, I had a spare Runcam Mini Swift here anyway. I had a spare video transmitter. I already had an F4 flight controller board here. I already had the antenna and the other little parts which I used, and the cables and things like that. So it wasn't that expensive all in. So yeah, the only and the props as well. So yeah, I made a slight mistake and bought the 50-51 props, so I had to buy another set of props. So we're probably talking about 90 quid all in, considering I had the bulk of the parts. Oh, I had specific parts here already. So yeah, super impressed. And this is my little journey into the dark side, and that's Emma as well. So yeah, it's pretty cool. And by the way, don't expect me to go and turn this into a quad channel, because I've only bought this for smashing around in the trees, and to be frankly honest, I'd give it a month and it probably slap an arm off it or something like that. So to be honest, I really should have bought a spare frame, if I'm brutally honest, because it is, my whole purpose of that one is for chucking in around trees, and trees and frames probably are not going to go very well. So that's Emma, and as you all now know, her code name is Eat My Marrow AHole. So yeah, and again, let me just check my notes on there. Yeah, but honestly, a big hat tip to Paulo for the suggestion on the frame. Really do like the frame. There was actually one bad thing which I can say about the frame. I wonder if I can show you on the picture on here. If they got a photo, yeah, that's probably a good picture which you can't see. So let me see if I can spot another one. See, yeah, there. So as you can see, just there, see those little adapters there. So the screws come up underneath the actual frame itself, and they screw in to these 4 little clamps on the bottom. So you've actually got 8 screws in the bottom. Really annoyingly, one of the taller parts here wasn't actually tapped, so we didn't have a thread in there. So I had to go on and tap my own thread in one of those little blocks. Besides, that's the only bad thing which I can say about the frame, and I can assure you that was rather frustrating, but it only took about 2-3 minutes just to turn a screw in, clamp it down, turn a screw in, back it out, clean out the thread, screw it down, turn it over, and then do the same from the opposite side as well. It literally just took 2 minutes with a screwdriver and a couple of screws. Or bolts, which went in really well. So DaveMan172 says welcome to the dark side. Yeah, honestly, it is not. I'm not going to go mental on quads. I've had quads before, you know, and I've got 2 other ones here which rarely get flown, but yeah, I really wanted something with a smaller frame, specifically just for bashing around in the trees, and I frankly don't give it very long. I give it a month before I've broken it beyond repair, so I probably should go on and buy another frame, because I don't think that one's going to last me very long at all. But yeah, build time, yeah, 2 hours, maybe a little bit extra, a bit of faffing, took it out. Yeah, had a few issues with the motor spinning the wrong way. My bad. That's why we had an extra hour's worth of swearing, because I was swearing at BHLE Suite for not doing the same ordering as Betaflight for the ESCs. Rather annoying. Hey-ho. Anyway, topic number 2 is foam snow. Now, this might be a little bit shocking to you, is that I've been here working on the office. We finally got some glass in the office, which you can't see there because I've got the blind down at the moment. In short, I want my office back, so I am having quite a hefty clear out of a whole raft of models here at the moment, literally because I want my office space back. After trying to do some work here on a couple of work-based projects, I just genuinely want my office back. So I am going to be really ruthless on a whole collection of models, and I've pinged the lads in the background, and I'm going to cull out a collection of models. I think there's only one flying wing which is in there, which is a brand new bonsai which I've had in a box. Which I've just not got round to flying, so or actually needing. So that's going to go and find a new home. The rest, some might be sad news for some of you. The FMS Edge 540 is going to find a new home. That's one of my, because it's just so big. You know, it's just a big lump. Even if you take the wings off it, it's quite frustrating. Again, it takes up too much room in my office. Again, I need to focus, as many of you know. Work pays for models, and right now I'm finding it difficult to work because I'm having to step over models. So I'm having a bit of a clear out at the moment. Once they've gone, I'll let you know which ones have gone and perhaps why they've gone as well. The ones which don't go will be turned into foam snow. So the original AXN, which I learnt to fly in, its days are numbered. There's a few other models which I've got here which are just not worth passing on to anybody, and they're going to go on and find new homes and maybe even get roosted. We'll save that for a later episode, maybe if we're live on the flight line or something like that. Right, with that said, let's move across to my favourite section of the day, which is Shout Out Corner. And I need to click on there, which is where I can say a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening to you, which is, I'm going to start from the bottom and work up. So good morning, Human, 7Demo7. Good morning, Jeff. Oli and FPV. Good morning, Van and Roddy. Good morning, Thomas and Lee and Lauren. Alan, good morning as well. Lee, Dave Man, Lauren. Scrolling up. So see Brad, good morning too. David Knox, good morning. Joanne, good morning. I hope you're feeling better, Poppet. Philip, good morning. Sir Bruce, good morning as well. Henry, good morning. Thumbs FPV. Andy, good morning. Let me scroll up, and I'm going carefully not to skip anybody. Good morning, RC Aviation. Good morning, Daniel, as well. Good morning, Elijah. Scrolling on up. And we're having a bit of a chat in here this morning. Good morning, Les, as well. And good morning, Chris. Good morning, Brad. And who was on here first thing this morning? And I'm just scrolling up to the top. Brian, I knew I'd missed somebody. A very good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening to you. And good morning, Colin P, as well. Happy day. And Sidekick, good morning as well. Hey, Matt. Oh, that's a really good question. Matt, did you ever maiden the Batty? Yes, I did. And ironically, it sat here right next to me. And I did fly it, and it did fly actually quite well for such a weird-shaped model. And I was, if I'm honest, I was going to rip it apart and nick the servos back out of it and stuff it in the bin and then maybe stamp on it. But what's actually happened, the most annoying thing about that kit is that it didn't actually come with a motor mount. And I think they just expect you to hot glue on the motor on the front, which was rubbish. So I made my own little motor mount, which you can just about see there on the camera if it focuses. And unfortunately, the spindle moved and I've broken the motor. So if I can be asked, I will change that over and put a different motor on the front. It did actually fly right for the 10-15 seconds of flight time, which it did have. And then the motor twisted and broke the wires on the one of the three wires going in the back. So I don't know. I wouldn't suggest you buy one, to be brutally honest. Mainly because you're missing a motor mount and it's really fragile. And as you can see here already, I've been that one landing which it had, it broke off the back, and you can see that I've already got pins sat in the back. Oh, a big tip, pins. Can you see that I've got 2 pins up underneath there? That's its CG. And that brings us nicely onto the next topic, which is the flying wing calculator. Now, as many of you know, or maybe remember from last week, I bought myself a Spec wing from Ritewing, which is, as you can see, she's getting here, she's being built. I do really like that on the bottom. I don't know how well that's going to come out on the camera. That did, or does look pretty damn cool. I assume that's where it was supposed to go. Well, if that's not where it's supposed to go, that's where it's been and gone, put it that way. And the thing is that we got a flying wing here, and I have got no idea on the CG. There was no paperwork, no instructions or anything on for the wing, and I needed to work out the CG. So I wonder if you've been in the same circumstance, which is that you've been and found or been given a flying wing and you've got absolutely no idea on what the CG is. And instead of going, I don't know, and just looking at it and going, oh, I'll put the CG there. That's not how it works, you know. So we do need a very good idea on where the CG is going to be. And how do we do that? Well, the good news is that there are a collection of different calculators out on the intervals. And one of them, again, I've got links to these in the video description for you. There is a simple one and there is an advanced one. We will get to the advanced one in a few moments. Now, before we go and take any measurements off the wing itself, it's really important to note is that when you do your measurements and again, I've got one of those you can just about see it down here in the corner. I've got one of those cutting mats. Is that the elevons, you do include your elevons as part of the measurement. So you can see that you could just put it on the desk and then measure it up. But the thing is that your actual CG is going to be incorrect. So you do need to include the elevons because they do form part of the actual wing itself. So when you put this down on your desk to make your measurements, is that you do include the elevons. Also, it's really handy if you do it at this stage, and that would be my alarm, is that if you do it at this stage, you'll notice on the bottom of this wing, we got a big hole in here. But when you do your measurements, it asks for a measurement from the top to the bottom, but over here you'd be kind of guessing. So what you do is that, so if I can hold this up so it makes sense to you, is that if you don't put the elevons on, what you can do is cross them in the middle like that, and then suddenly you can find the correct measurement down here. And you don't worry about it having a hole in the bottom. You just pretend or just carry on where the bottom of the wing would be to make the cross at the bottom. So a big tip for you, again, if you're building a wing and you haven't got an idea of what the CG is, then yeah, don't put the elevons on just yet. Use them for the measurements. And Jeff, I totally agree with you. I wouldn't suggest anybody buys one. We'll see how it does anyway. Right, and morning, Scott, by the way. Let's have a quick look. Right, so we were chatting about the measurements. Now, CG calculator, like I said, there's a link to this in the video description. And the thing is that we need 4 measurements. Okay, now I've already been on this morning and I've been and measured mine. And actually, it looks like I've been and put the correct dimensions in here. So, number 1, we need the wingspan. So we just get our tape measure out and we go from one wingtip to the other wingtip. And in my case, it's 927 millimeters. Then we need the root chord. So you know I just mentioned about putting the elevons across and making the cross on there. That then means is that we can then do the correct measurement from the tip of the model down to where the cross is. Move this around the right way around. There we go. Which came out at 297 millimeters. And then we got the tip chord. Now the thing is that if you don't know what the tip chord is that if you click into the box, did you just see that moved around from there? So you click into the box and you see that blue line on the screen has just been moved over here. So tip chord is the length of the tip. Now remember, that length of the tip includes the elevon. Okay, so you don't just measure, get this right, you don't measure just from there to there, you include the distance which the elevon has given you as well. Because remember, the elevons are a continuation of the actual wing itself as a flying surface. And mine was 165 millimeters. And then the sweep. The sweep is normally the hardest one to measure and that's where a measuring mat comes in really, really handy. You make sure that your model is in there straight, vertically and horizontally. You make sure your model is in there straight, and then you go from the tip. So you go from the tip of the actual wing itself, the outer edge, up to where the nose is, and that's where a measuring mat comes in really, really handy. Okay, if you don't have a measuring mat, then I would suggest maybe a long ruler and then a set square to make sure you've got 90 degrees, and then do your measurement that way. And in my case, it was 295. And then, of course, if you click on update, it will update the actual picture itself. And then it's been and given us a CG. Now, which one of these values on the right-hand side is the CG distance on the right-hand side? So it's telling us, let me just go and zoom in a bit to make it a little bit easier to see. Maybe scroll down a bit. There we go. It says the CG distance is 180.9. So we're going to call it 181 millimeters from the nose, which I don't have my metal ruler here, so we'll quickly measure it out roughly on the bottom of the wing. So what we're talking about, 181, which is about there. So I'm going to choose that piece of flute there. So you would then mark it on your model vertically. Now the one thing about these Ritewing models is it makes it really easy for you to work out, put this around straight, for you to then put a line all the way across. Now, when it comes to actually marking the line on the model, what I like to do with mine is that number 1 is that I'll put a little pen mark on there, and then number 2, the little craft pins. You know, the pins that look like a T-pin, but it's just like a normal pin, but it's got a little blob of whatever plastic on the end. And what I like to do with mine is just put them in on the bottom of the wing. So then when you're on the flight line, is that you can very quickly put your hands underneath the wing and you've got that tactile lump. Of course, you could perhaps use a little dab of hot glue up underneath the wing. You just want something which you can feel with the bottom of your fingers when you're putting your finger up underneath the wing. And you can just feel it and then make sure if the CG is right or not, as the case may be, from the flight line. So that's how you use the flying wing calculator. really straightforward. So it's just, what was it, 4 measurements, and we had the wingspan, kind of an obvious one. We had the depth of the wing, so from its nose to its tail, well, its of its center section. We had the tip chord, which was right off on the end, and remember that does include the elevons. And then the sweep, which is the trickier one to measure because, especially with bigger wings, then it makes it quite awkward. So, but a cutting mat, one of those big A3 cutting mats, does make those measurements an awful lot easier. Now, I do know that you may be thinking, Matt, what about a blunt nose wing? Now, again, the links to both of these calculators are in the video description. On this one, there is a link down at the bottom, but I've already been and got that open, is that there is another calculator on here. And this one is a little bit more advanced, but there's one value which you need to be aware of, which is the fuselage width value just down here. I'm just going to zoom in a touch on the screen. The fuselage width. So if you do have a blunt, so if you don't have a blunt nose on here, you would enter 0 in there. So that looks more like a flying wing. But if you do have a blunt nose section and maybe it was 20 centimeters wide, you type in your value, and of course you could just type in 20, that's up to you. But the thing is, you need to keep the measurements all in the same units, if that makes sense. So don't mix centimeters with millimeters. So keep them all concurrent across them. And that's how you can work out the CG on a blunt nose flying wing. Now this one is a little bit more advanced because you can add parts. So you see me just add that on there. So let me just call that battery. And then width, we'll do, I don't know, 1800 by 10. Oh, I've done that wrong, haven't I? Don't put the values in there. We'll call it 8. And then we'll move that down, and that needs to be a bit. There you go. And then you can't see it, but in fact, why don't I just move this over out of the way so you can see? There you go. So you can add parts to your model itself, and then you can use these arrows over here on the right hand side, and then I'm just going to click that one down, and there you go. You could say that's your battery, and then you could move the battery back a bit, you can move the battery forwards a bit, you could rotate the battery round, like so, and then, in fact, I'm going to rotate it all the way back. Oh, too far, we'll put that back, and that way you can virtually mock up your components onto your flying wing itself. Now, if that's something which you're going to do, there is a download option, which I cannot remember for Toffee on here, but there is an option which you can then download the file itself, and of course you can share it with someone else and they can give you like a suggestion on a layout. I have done this before for a flying wing. It did help in the organization of getting the parts right on the wing itself, and of course you can also change the colors on them as well. You just click on there and you can just go through the colors, and again, if you're going to go to that kind of level, remember to perhaps weigh the motor mount, for example, things that are things which can get missed. The other thing is as well, you might want to also include the weight of the winglets on the end as well. You might want to make a part to put on here as well, to if you're using core flute, or maybe 2 layers of core flute or really thick core flute, you also may want to include those in your calculation as well. As such, you might want to put a little thin strip down here on the wingtips as well. Again, if you're going to go to that level, it does make it easier when it comes around to actually build the model as itself. Let's have a quick look. I'm trying to keep. Let's have a quick look. Zovim, apologies for that, I've just mullered your name. It says, Matt, what do you think about the Firestar EX FPV glider? I have got no. Let me have a quick look. I don't think I've seen that one, to be honest, or I may have seen it and may have deemed it as just being ridiculously expensive for what it was. Just having a quick look. I'll tell you what, let's get on the screen. Good question, fella. I've already got a Phoenix 2000, which is not really designed for FPV, to be brutally honest, because the motor's on the front. It's a 2 meter wingspan. I don't know. I've not seen anybody fly one of those, so if you have seen someone fly one of these, let the chappie know in the live chat, or obviously if you're watching the recorded version, do pass on your comments about it. I'm a little bit wary of going, oh, why didn't you have a look at the reviews tab? Because as I've personally found out, some of the reviews are not actual real true reflections of the actual model itself. The grasshopper Piper Cub on there is an absolute POS, and the reviews don't actually reflect that. That's the words I was trying to say. So CG calculators, if you do have a flying wing and you've got no idea what the CG is on a wing, you can find out. And again, I would suggest just going with the basic one. Just measure a couple of measurements. It takes no more than 5 minutes tops just to get the measurements out, stick them into the calculator. Also, I just want to point out for advanced users, I typically always only ever go for 20%. If you're in any doubt on the wing and you're thinking, well, that CG doesn't look right, which it should be, okay, you can go and choose 15%, which then does bring the CG forwards, okay, or it will bring the measurement forward, so you end up making your model nose heavier. But for personal use, for me speaking, from my experience with the calculator, 20% has been absolutely fine for pretty much every single model which I've used the calculator for. So 181 millimeters from the nose is the measurement which I'm going to be using for that one. Which is happy days, because like I said, I didn't have a bloody clue what the CG was going to be in the kit, because it didn't come with any paperwork or any suggestion on what the CG might be. So, hey ho, at least I now know, which is classed as happy days. Right, that brings us on to the next topic, and we've only got 2 topics left here this morning, and apologies, I've not seen much of your chat on there. What kind of weights do you use for your wings? By the way, if it... Normally, I'll get a model to hit CG by itself by rearranging components to the best I can. Sometimes with a model like this, potentially, you are limited because the battery has a fixed position. And the only way around it is to get some lead in the nose. Now, remember, it's just like a lever, like you were taught in school. Okay, is that to get the maximum use out of the weight which you have added to a model, you get it as close to the nose as possible, because there's no point just like sticking a lump of lead in the battery bay, because it's just like a lever. You're going to get more results by putting it towards the or having it right on the end of the nose. So if I do ever add lead to a model, it goes as close to that nose as feasibly possible. Even if I have to go and melt a hole in there and then get it down in that way as close as I can. And again, remember, if you're in any doubt on the CG, make it nose heavy, okay? You should never ever need to add weight to a tail of a model, ever. And yeah, if you're in any doubt, make the model nose heavy, because flying a nose heavy model is an awful lot easier than a tail heavy model. So yeah, really, really good question. Let's have a quick look. School, can't remember that far way back. Neither can I. Shocking times. Right, last 2 topics. Ventilation in models. Big hat tip to Wayne for letting me to use these images. I just want to make a point here. This is Wayne's mini Skywalker. And it was running with a 30 amp ESC, probably a little pokey motor on the back, and it's got rather kind of toasty inside the model itself. And there we go, we can see what we've got here is that we've got a battery which is as it gets used and flown hard, I would assume, Wayne, judging by the state of that model, it was flown hard. So we have a battery which gets warm. We also have iNav in there, ironically, so we've got a flight controller board in there as well, which again generates its own heat. Not a lot, but it does generate some heat. And then we had a 30 amp, I believe it was a quad ESC. Okay, now the thing to remember is that when it comes to using speed controllers in normal air, like fixed wing models, on quadcopters, they have masses of airflow. So think of that propeller spinning around on there. It's keeping that little ESC in there, that 30 amp ESC, really cool. It is, even though I've been and covered it with some insulation tape, that little ESC is going to get warm at best. Okay, because it has so much ventilation going across the top, and it has a propeller continuously putting airflow over the top. That's why we don't typically see heat sinks on top of quad ESCs, because they're always getting loads of airflow. And again, on a quad in EMMA, we can see that even the rest of the flight controller board and things like that, it's all got massive amount of airflow potential. It's all open-sided. Whereas in a Mini Skywalker, for example, or any other foam-based fixed wing, is that it's all nice and warm. And foam has fantastic insulation properties, which keeps the heat in. So the combination of a warm battery, a flight controller, a 30 amp quad ESC, which has, well, I presume it had no ESC heat sink on top of it, in a model which had pretty much zero airflow, because there is a little hole at the back and there is 2 little holes on the front, but that's not really going to give a lot of airflow inside of a model like this, and it did result in Wayne cooking his poor little Mini Skywalker. So you can just about see that there is a little tiny little air hole. There's one on the opposite side, and there are 2 little holes on there. As a general rule of thumb, for these, whatever size hole you have at the front of the model to get air in, you need 4 times the size of the hole at the back to get the air out. And as you can see in this instance, the model has been resorted to creating its own air hole out the side of the model. So please learn from Wayne's experience there. If you are gonna, by the looks of it, that's quite a chunky prop you got on the back of that one, Wayne. If you're going to perhaps over-prop a motor on a very small model, put the ESC on the outside. At least when you're flying around, you can see that the ESC is on fire, and you can think about landing rather than seeing a big smoke trail as it comes in. But on a very, very serious point, ventilation in these models. And again, those of you which are following along with the iNav series, you saw me when I built actually finally installed the flight controller into the FX61. I did have a concern about airflow inside of that model, so I printed out a 3D NACA duct, and that model is now going to have loads and loads of airflow going in there. Those of you which saw the C1 Chaser Maiden, for example, I cut out 2 triangles out of the lid, and that model comes down stone cold because of the amount of airflow going through the model. So please learn by Wayne's experience there. Again, I would personally suggest not really using quad motors in a fixed wing model. They don't have any heat sinks on them. Of course, you can still use them, they still work, but put them in an area where they would get massive amounts of airflow. And again, think about the S800 wing, for example. Their suggestion was to put the ESC on the bottom of the wing. And heat rises, not really up for it. So put the ESC somewhere where it might get some airflow, and typically the best place for that is on the top of a model, because that's where heat rises and where you're going to get plenty of airflow. So I'd hate for you to have a model like Wayne's there. So take the point, it happens, and it could have been potentially easily resolved by maybe putting the ESC on the outside of the model. And by the way, I've got one of these Mini Skywalkers, and that's exactly where my ESC is mounted. It's mounted just on here on the outside over here, and then we have the hole here for the wires to go back in, and then we have a hole in there to go for the connector wires to go back in through the model itself, and then it gets maximum airflow. Obviously, is not as pretty as maybe putting all the parts inside the middle, but then when I rag mine, it's not gonna try and melt itself out. And apologies, I've seen that there's lots of chat going on here in the background, and I've missed you most of it. I do apologise. We've been chatting about that. And a morning, Nick, by the way, and Alistair. Just seen two new names appear above my head. And that brings us to the last topic of this morning, the iNav progress. Now, what have I got in here? Now, there are 3 episodes or 3 parts of the iNav series, and we're pretty much done, besides a couple of tips which I want to include as additional videos as well. So we obviously have the maiden of the FX61. That's going to be the next major episode. We also have calibrating the ESC, because that process is different if you're using a flight controller. So we're going to do that one probably first, so at least then it brings you up to date with ready for maiden, and then we'll do that one as soon as I can. And then we've got the using this servo auto trim feature compared to mechanical trim. Now, I'm going to give you a little heads up on this one. I do prefer to set the models up with mechanical trim. So when it comes around to the maiden, what we'll do for the maiden itself is that we're just going to lob the model up in pass-through mode. We're going to get the model into the sky, and then we're going to trim it in. Because chances are, since the last time I've flown that model, we need to put some trim in there. I've given it a little bit of reflex, but we might need to put a little bit of extra trim in there. And then once we've got the model trimmed in, we're going to get her up high, and then we're going to keep our finger on the mode switch, and we're going to click ourselves into horizon mode. But we're going to keep our finger on that switch just in case it goes Pete's on, and maybe you missed the servo movements episode, which unfortunately we've seen that once in the Faceballs group. Anyway, we'll click it into horizon mode, and assuming that it stays and in a level position, it doesn't try and spin on you. Of course, if it spins on you, you kept your finger on the horizon switch and click it back into pass-through and save it. But we'll just get the model to fly straight, in short. We'll get it to just make sure the modes work. Does it return to home and things like that? And of course, then once we get the model down, is that what we'll then do is come back to the workbench. We'll turn the model back on in pass-through mode, and then we'll note where the surfaces are, which is a lot easier in a flying wing, and then we'll mechanically change those surfaces and take the trim back out of the transmitter. Now, of course, you can't. There is another route which you can use, which is servo auto trim in iNav, but my preferred. Again, I'm following down the route which I prefer, which is to do mechanical trim on the servos themselves. It just means that if for whatever reason is that the flight controller conks out, okay, for like whatever reason, is that the model is still going to fly in a straight line. It's not going to lean off and go off in a different direction and things like that. So and there's a couple of other little ones which I want to cover. I do want to have a look at auto launch as well. That was a big feature which I know many of you which are interested in. Personally, I don't actually see any value in the auto launch feature because I'm quite capable of launching the model myself, you know. But I do appreciate for some of you, launching models can be a difficulty. So we will look at the auto launch feature in a later episode as well. Right, Jim, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us, sir. Sorry, I've just seen Jim's comment above there. Colin, we have heard some news about the Sidewinder. It doesn't look like it's going to come out until later this year, so that's why I've not included that in the last couple of RC Coffee Chats as well. Yeah, Sidewinder has been delayed 4 months, Colin. Thank you, Joe. A little bit of disappointment, to be honest. Again, it was apparently supposed to be May. And we're now almost in July, so bit of a shame. Right, to quickly recap the topics which we've been covered today, we have Emma for the, again, you're not going to see me going in a quad direction. I've just bought this for bashing around in the trees. I don't give it very long. Her life expectancy is not good. We talked about foam stow as well. I am going to have a massive cull on some of the models which I've got here, and I do need to be a little bit ruthless in what I've got here because I want some of my workspace back. Let's have a quick look. We spoke about ventilation in RC models. Yes, please learn from Wayne's experience and don't put components in a very well insulating material and then give it absolutely no ventilation because bad things can happen as we can see on there, and I'd hate for that to happen for you and your model. If you're in any doubt about the ventilation in your model, you probably should add some in some shape or form. And remember, the general rule is for whatever size entry hole you have for any air, you need 4 times the amount of exit hole at the back somewhere. And again, it doesn't have to be one hole, it can be a collection of smaller holes, but if you have one hole on the front, generally speaking, you need 4 times the size for the air to exit. Otherwise, you're just going to cause drag, if that makes sense. We also spoke about the flying wing calculator as well. Really, really simple to use. As we saw, we only need 4 dimensions. Remember, we also do include the elevons as part of the measurements as well. And personally speaking, I only ever use 20% for an all-round value, and that works really, really well. In fact, I did try the expert one once, and it was grossly tail heavy. So 20% seems to work really, really well. So I now know for the Spec wing, that the CG is 181 millimeters from the nose, which is fantastic for when you get a model or you get given or you buy a model and it turns up and you've got no idea on a CG. You now know where you can work out a CG of that model. Remember, if that wing is a blunt nose wing, you can change the width of the blunt nose using the fuselage width option down here. And again, if those of you which want to use that calculator for a non-blunt nose flying wing, you set the fuselage width to 0 and then it will make it into a pointy wing. And of course, remember, you can add parts and then move them around on your flying wing just using the little buttons over on the right hand side. Pretty damn cool, to be honest. I think I'm most impressed. And then the last topic which we covered this morning was iNav. Couple more episodes left in that series. I will add in there's a couple of other topics which I want to discuss as around iNav, and we will also be doing a larger or broader look at different flight controllers in general as well. We will do, again, I will keep this based upon my own knowledge and my own experiences. We'll be talking about a whole collection of different flight controllers. We'll try and do, to the best of my abilities, a comparison between the different flight controllers which are out there and available today. So we'll take a vector and we'll compare it to iNav, and we'll compare iNav to a Pixhawk, and we'll compare a Pixhawk to a Pix Racer. We'll also take a look at the differences between, again, these are all going to be based upon my own personal experiences, between Mission Planner and Q Ground Control as well. We'll talk about some of the positive sides. We're going to talk about some of the negative sides as well, which could be the practicality, like the bloody Pixhawk. The biggest weakness to the Pixhawk is that it doesn't include an OSD. And we'll also talk about the positive sides as well, like the Vector being like one of the, right now, probably the best flight controller, all-in-one flight controller out there on the market. But that does come with a negative that is also very expensive as well. And you'll find out why I end up with, why I've ended up, I'll just get these here, 2 off my desk just to make the point, why I've ended up with, I've got 2 flight controllers here, or with iNav sat up on them, ready to go into 2 models. So you'll probably find out why I ended up with working out that iNav was probably a good choice around. So hey ho, we will cover that in a later episode at some point. So Elijah says, too many flight controllers. Zovan says, do I have to have a digital servo for iNav? No, you do not. No, just standard servos are absolutely fine. Not so much iNav. So Hugh says, got a very important question. Is it possible to fly missions with the Omnibus F3 and Mission Planner? The answer to that is no, Hugh. And Hugh, go across to the iNav wiki and look up, again, all the answers for you are in the wiki, in short. So I'm just going to have a quick look there itself. So we're going to go across to the iNav wiki. Just type that into the old Googler. You'll find it. Down here, iNav missions and waypoint flying. That's the page which you want to have a read of. There is incompatibility right now. I don't know in the future. In fact, actually, that's probably the one negative which I can actually say about iNav is that you can do missions with iNav. That is possible. And the app which I use, or I'll show you maybe in a later episode, later part of the series, is that you use an application called EZ GUI, and you can set the waypoints up on your phone or your Android tablet, and then send them to your model. Again, normally you would want to hook up a Bluetooth module. Again, you can see why this is going to be a couple of episodes later. You can then send the waypoints to the model, and you can then go and stick it into waypoint mode, and it will go off and fly for a mission for you. So it's definitely possible, but Hugh, do read the manual on that, and the wiki is the best page to do that. And yeah, let's have a look, and it's on the links on the right hand side. So very, very good question. On that note, it's time for me to go. Apologies if I've been amiss your questions. If you do have any questions or comments about anything which I've covered here today, there's a couple of options for you. You can leave a comment underneath this video. You could perhaps nip across to the Faceballs group. There's a link to that in the video description for you. That's where we have a general chit chat afterwards. There is over 1,000 cool pilots like myself and you over there. So if you've not joined already yet, there is a link to the Rag the Nuts Off group in the video description. If this is your first time here, welcome aboard. I'm Matt. Thank you for joining me and us for today's RC Coffee Chat. Like I said, if you are new here, there's a subscribe button underneath this video. It says Matthew Ogborn. Like I said, I'm Matt. Welcome aboard. Press the red button and to subscribe. If you'd like to be notified when the next episode out, press the little bell icon thingy and YouTube will let you know. Now, ultimately, I'd like to say a massive thank you to you for joining me here today for today's RC Coffee Chat, and we will be back next Wednesday at the same time, hopefully with a couple more episodes to go, and hopefully not with Eat My Marrow in so many pieces, or in multiple pieces, should I say. So on that note, for myself, Matt, happy flying, cheerios!